Good morning or good afternoon. This is Greg Thorpe presenting my report for C5 for 2020. C5 has about 17 members across Australia and New Zealand. We have members from each Australian state and New Zealand except for Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory. And we have a very latest member from WA, which is filling a gap that has existed for quite some time. We met last in July, and like most panels, this was a virtual meeting. Key issues there were the preparation for Paris 2020, the virtual session held earlier this year, looking at the technical papers from C5 and importantly the large disturbance workshop. That workshop is held in conjunction with C2, and as everyone likes a good bit of disaster, this is often a well-attended session. The session itself went off very well. We had between 100 and 200 people participating in the virtual session when it was held. We'll be meeting again in the middle of next year when we will have the special reporter questions for the proposed Paris 2021. The next few slides will look at a summary of market and regulatory matters in Australia and New Zealand and a quick snapshot of the similar matters occurring around the world. The most significant activity, as people will be aware of in the NEM, relates to the work of the Energy Security Board, which is looking at a post-2025 design to either markedly update or replace the current design, which has been described by the chair of the ESB as no longer fit for purpose. They've issued a consultation paper and identified 7 work streams, which I've listed in the slide that you can see. I won't go through each one of them. What they have emphasised is that it's important that work across the 7 work streams is done in a coordinated manner so that they don't end up creating chaos by the way that changes are made in one area, which may or may not conflict with another one. At the same time as the ESB is looking at post-2025, there are a number of immediate changes which need attention. And the ESB has submitted rule changes, so has AEMO, AER and the AEMC themselves are working on major programs for change. Probably the biggest change is for the integrated system plan, which was a recommendation from the Chief Scientist, Alan Finkel. And this is one which, this is a program which lays out prospective network investments. There's an interesting either conflict or impact on RIT-Ts, which have previously been the main mechanism for identifying which are the best projects to proceed. We'll see how that works out. Turning now to Western Australia, there are 2 areas of development, there are developments in 2 areas. The well-established market in the southwest of the system, southwest of the state. There, the biggest change is that network access is being transitioned from an unconstrained to constrained model. Unconstrained has been in place since the market started in 2006, where the idea was that every generator would be able to get to market unconstrained or have some special arrangement in place if a network constraint occurred. That was a major difference to the NEM. It was also economically inefficient. So the WA market is also introducing a whole of system plan, which has a lot of parallels with the NEM ISP. In parallel, there are markets for ancillary services that are being changed and also for DER. It doesn't get a great deal of attention, but there is a reform going on in the Pilbara, in the northwest interconnected system. There, which is around the mining areas, of course, there will be an independent system operator for the first time who will coordinate security and also ancillary services. It'll have a whole of system plan as well and improved arrangements for coordinating outage management. Dispatch will not be decided by that system operator. It'll be according to the contracts of the mining companies in the main, but subject to management for security by the new independent system operator. Finally, in Australia, the Darwin to Katherine interconnected system. There are some significant reforms going on there. These reforms will be replicated in whole or in part in the other two regulated networks around Alice Springs and Tennant Creek in due course. These reforms have been in the wind for quite some time and have been stalled for a whole raft of reasons, including politics. They've recently kicked along because the current government wants to have a 50% renewables by 2030 policy in place, and that means a whole stack of new technologies, which introduces all of the issues about intermittence, inverter-based plant, etc., that are also a feature of the NEM and the WEM. But I must say that Darwin, or in fact all of the Northern Territory systems, have been coping with much more severe situations with intermittent plant and very light inertia systems for quite some time. As part of that reform, the economic regulation has already been transferred to the AER, and where it is sensible, then the regulatory regime will look like the NEM or the NER. One area where it will certainly not look like the NEM is that that reliability will look much more like the WEM, and it'll be a capacity and energy market. Work is proceeding on that as we speak. In New Zealand, there have been a very long-standing spot market, not unlike the concepts of the NEM, for quite a long time. A big change will be that they are about to lose a very large chunk of load, and they are looking at new guidelines for pricing of network. They're making some arrangements for changes to market information. They are looking at changing the pricing to a real-time process from an ex-post pricing arrangement. and they're also changing the arrangements for dry year backup. The hydro facilities in New Zealand are still a very, very important part of the New Zealand system, and they have extensive arrangements for when the inflows start to decrease. And basically, what do they do then? Internationally, just very quickly, there's a lot of work going on internationally. A lot of that is driven by the same things that we see across Australia, related to intermittent plant and renewables, but quite a bit is not. It's at different stages of development. So there's a list there, which I won't go through each one of them, but we do have renewable integration. We do have some issues around emissions, fuel switching in PJM. We've got a couple of places in Asia and in South Africa which are in the early stages of reform, looking at unbundling, disaggregating their existing utility. And in Europe, always very interesting because of the number of markets, number of countries, and number of authorities. So they are still working on refining their cross-border trading arrangements. So that's about it from C5. Thank you.